Welcome to Defining Art. I'm your host, Joe Bravo. We're here at the International Museum of Art and Science to see some new masterworks by Maestro Bernini. Bernini began his long and accomplished career creating paintings for spare change on the streets of post-World War II Italy. From these humble beginnings emerged a formidable painter who was to have more than 160 one-man exhibitions of his work in over a dozen countries. At the dawn of the 21st century, Bernini began an entirely new body of work, breaking from his figurative and geometric past. Ironically, he turned to abstract expressionism. While this may not sound courageous in and of itself, at the end of the 20th century, the figure had once again returned to art, and rendering was once again a valuable skill. But Bernini has made an entire career of zigging when others have zagged. And once again, he has returned to abstraction for a new generation. This groundbreaking body of work is entitled Face of God. Welcome to this episode of Defining Art, where today we're joined by Maestro Bernini. Welcome.
Thank you.
Maestro, we have a new exhibit of your paintings here at the International Museum of Art and Science. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the works that you created for this exhibit?
Well, I would like to preface that I was here in McAllen in this facility 19 years ago with a totally different body of work. At the time, I had just discovered geometry and the illusion of dimension. Working in this room today is the latest work, is the latest evolution in my path as an artist, as a painter, I should say. And it gives a full representation of what has occupied me during the last 7 years.
Well, this work is really different for you, isn't it? I mean, in the works that you've had in the past, you've focused a lot on geometries and on roses and figurative imagery and whatnot. But this is more abstract than your usual palette. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to make these more abstract, almost metaphysical works?
All throughout my life, I've been very precise in the execution of my work. I had this notion that mastery had to be related to that. What you see in here is my mature work, is what has evolved from the precision into control in the sense to create a background, to create a space for the color to vibrate, but then rely on the accident, on the dropping of the paint to complete the work.
Well, you say this is your mature work. For those who aren't familiar, you've been painting for over 50 years. You began on the streets of Rome and sort of painting for lunch and painting for dinner, and then you worked your way up, and you now have well over 160 one-man shows. You've lived in a dozen countries and exhibited, and known presidents and been collected by great industrialists. How did you sort of make that course to come to this more mature work? What brought you to this point?
More than a career, it's been a path, it's been a journey. And I chose that journey from the very beginning because when I left home at 15, the only skill that I have to a certain degree was to copy things that I would see. As a matter of fact, the earlier work was basically either landscapes or churches, cathedral, and I relied on the tourists mainly for support, because they would ask me, maestro, artista, is this this is beautiful, is it for sale? And I didn't know what to price, therefore I said, whatever you'll give me. And that was it. I never went hungry. They they proceeded to acquire my work at different levels, and to this day I still do not have any particular goal in mind. I just paint every day, I should say every night. And the work has evolved itself, as you can see in this room. I don't have any formula, I don't have any plans, for as long as I paint every night. And I'm true to my wife, the God of art, and she's a very jealous God. Take care of my needs. The kind of life that I've chosen, it's encompassing everything. Discipline is usually lacking to a great extent in creative people. To have a partner that understands and becomes a mirror of who you do, it's a big asset. And yes, you need a great partner in order to amount to anything. If you look in the field of politics, for instance, if you look into any public, any endeavor involving the public, this is the element. And they say behind a great man there's always a good woman. I like to think that in front of every good man there's a great woman. And I'm grateful to my luck that this is happening in my work, in my life.
You said something about discipline there. I think sometimes people think that artists are just generally undisciplined and lead happy-go-lucky, easygoing lives. Sometimes artists may lack the discipline for certain mundane things, but they still require a discipline for the work. They may not be very good at the discipline of getting the bills paid or the discipline of logistics of maintaining the property or those sorts of things, but the discipline that they do require. Can you tell us a little bit about what makes a good painter a good painter?
Oh, there's no such a thing as a good painter.
Well, that may be the first thing that you need to know if you're going to be a good painter,
yes,
that you're never going to get there.
Yes, because particularly in the contemporary world of art, it's a free-for-all. As a matter of fact, the ones that usually get more recognition, financial and so forth, are very poor artists, very poor craft people, because today it's acceptable to have a factory to produce your work. Or I, unfortunately, was programmed in 1941. Therefore, my idea of a good artist is something that falls back into the old school. The world has been freed for us by genius minds, people like Picasso and other ones that broke the ground, that make it possible to be free and to do whatever you choose to do, rather than to be subjected to commissions and ways of the olden days of art. That's why the discipline is really a crucial element, and it can only be self-imposed. And in my particular case, because I came from the streets, and I'm self-educated to a great extent. Self-educated meaning reading has been an integrating part of my path. I've read a book a day since the age of 9, and I still continue on that path. But the craft itself, you have to find the rope that you can tie at one end of the street, and it has to be real tight, and you have to, in order for you to cross that street, you have to stay on that rope. And this is the discipline that I'm referring to. Because if I don't work every day, literally every day, when I'm on the road and I cannot attend to be in my studio and paint, I feel deprived, because it's such a strong routine, a lifetime routine of working 8, 9, 10 hours every night, that I cannot live without it. And the product of that is in this room.
There's, mastering a craft, and then there's having something to say. And you can be a great wordsmith and know how to say something, but then you need to know what to say and why to say it. And that goes into the other observation you made, which is that you read a book a day and have been reading having this voracious reading appetite for many, many years. And I know this is true because I've seen your library, and again, for those who haven't, it goes on forever. You have a voluminous library. Tell us a little bit about what you read and how what you're reading has impacted the art you've created.
Well, I started reading, speed reading, when I was 9 years old. So the very first books that I had to read were the classical, which were part of my classical education in Italy. Now, literature was always part of my interest. I had read by the age of 13, I had read all of the Italian classics, and then by the age of 14, I had all the British classics. And then at 14 and 15, I really fell in love with the Russian writers. Later on came the Americans because they were a physical presence in Italy. And then after that, there was a time where I had to, well, around my late 20s, I had to read more about religions, because religions seemed to be a fixation in everybody's mind. And what was amazing was every different countries, there was a different religion. And it made sense to that particular group. So I had to question what is religion, which implied a lot of reading textbooks going back all the way to the Sumerian, and then you come all the way down to contemporary times, which was relating to the God of the Jews, and all of these different elements were an integrating part of my life. So the religion took about, I would say, 15 years of reading, and I was never sticking to one particular one, because there was always another one, a new one that seemed to be more exciting to my mind. And so that was a religious period of my life, and that time it reflected in some of the paintings, which were more literal in many ways. And today, because of my public speaking, I really want to be aware of what is going on in the world of art. Art has reflected this evolutionary process all throughout the ages, and now we are in a total chaotic ground, which reflects again the chaos that we are living in as a human race. And so now a lot of that has to do with biographies. A lot of that, the reading, has to do with publications that cover the different art scene throughout the world. And this is where I am now. I stopped reading fiction, even though anything that is written is fiction, in my book.
I take your point.
That was, I have more interest in what is relevant to my field.
I think that it's interesting that after all that study of comparative literature, religion, and in the cultural and historic context, that you come, at this fulfillment of your career, and you paint this particular series after an interest in science, an interest in materialistic philosophy, this sense of the concrete that you had in so much of the earlier work. And yet all that study of comparative religion, and despite your materialist protestations, there's these paintings that are called the face of God.
First of all, we talked about the religions, and we have been fabricating gods for the last 60,000 years that we have record of, from the caves of East Africa on. And the problem with that is that the more you know about these gods, the more difficult it gets to pick one, because they all add merit. I cannot go in somebody's house and say, hey, I don't like your furniture. They picked this furniture because they liked it. And it's the same with religion. Religion is obviously something that we need. It's in our innate, it's in our brain. And again, there was a time when you needed a God of hope, and then there was a time you needed a God that scared you. And then, we have had every experience known to man put under these guise that we call religion. So the fact that I have the titling of these of this most recent work, The Faces of God, it was not meant to be an illustration of the way God looks, because in my mind, if I could figure out how a God looks, it would be a very bad portrait. So it was more a thought of see, in the work I'm hoping to be a reflection of a life based on universality. I really think, because of my travels, on my searching and all that, that I belong to the universe, not to the place, the little village where I was born in northern Italy, or the towns and states that I visited or lived and worked. No, for me, it was important to feel that there's going to be something much bigger than me that I'm not capable of portraying. And it became, well, it became like I finished one painting, the first one of this series, and when it was completed, it came to me that, oh my God, you know, what have I done? It was that kind of recognition that made me call it The Face of God. Why not? It was the Italians particularly that they painted the God of Catholicism. There was an Italian that preceded me by 400 or 500 years that did that. So I figure I could very well fit into that mode.
Tell us a little bit about the importance of color to you, why you choose the colors you choose, and the issues that you deal with, and the complexity of the way you mix color and appropriate these saturated, rich colors that some artists are a little more timid to use. Anybody who comes into this gallery is going to be knocked over by the color in here.
It's a big question, because if you have 2 hours, maybe I can really start answering this question. The issue basically is the way we are programming. It affects us for the rest of our lives. So, having said that, I was born in 1941. So my first memory is World War II. And somehow, those memories are in black and white. Even if I dream of those days, it's black and white. And then when we went to school, we had no illustration, colored illustration. It was too expensive. We didn't have color in our life. There was no television. Even the movies were black and white. So then when I grew into the magic of color, because in our classroom only 3 of the 31 in the class were allowed to use colors because they were very expensive, I worked real hard with my drawings to be one of those 3, and I became one of the 3. So it put me on a very privileged environment.
Let me get this straight. So you were taking drawing classes.
Yes.
And it was post-war Europe, so the colors are hard to come by.
Oh, yes.
And so you had to move up the draftsman pecking order before you were allowed color.
To use color, yes.
So color was a reward for mastering drawing.
Yes.
Okay, there's a lesson for all art teachers in the contemporary world.
Yes.
Don't let your students have color until they've reached being the best draftsman in the class.
Well, the problem in this country is more complex, because here they throw colors at you from the age of 2. You have crayons everywhere. You know, the kids play, they do everything with colors, and then when they grow up, they say, oh, I did that when I was 2. So there's a complacency.
You take color for granted.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
For me, it was a great place to be in. You know, it was, and then, and I was always very sparing with color. First of all, whatever little formal education I had, you know, I left at 15, so it wasn't much. But it was always toned down, harmonized. Do it this way. The sky is never blue and the grass is never green. It's always, and all these rules, see, I was made to break the rules. So even the earlier landscape that was doing for hire, they had too much color in many ways. And color has been my greatest ally, and later on I realized that color is the arm of emotion. It's the heart. And so I am, as an Italian, I'm very emotive, and so it's a natural for me. There was also, every color has its own energy, its own power. And as as we go through life, we like certain colors at a certain time. So it was never a set field. When I got to the discovery of acrylic and the magic of the fact that these new pigments based on polymer are forever without changing, then the color became even more important. In my case, I paint every painting like if it were the last one. I put everything I know, everything I have learned into this journey of search into the painting. So, and that's in a sense why these paintings are so loud. You know, they're all strong because they're not diluted. It's what I do. I paint, and each one of these represent who I am. And so I have no idea. I don't make any projections. I know for a fact that if I come back here 19 years from now, fat chance, I'll be 90, I will have big paintings, much bigger paintings. I have to find a way to break the code of acrylic further than I've done so far that will allow me to work on a much larger scale. And probably will be just a blank canvas, a beautiful, big, white blank canvas. So if I have to envision that, if you come to the studio, you see something like that on a wall of the studio, that's what it is. I'm fixing to die. I personally don't want to hang around here longer than I did. I mean, I think this dimension is very limiting. You know, unfortunately, we have a body with certain needs every so often that is not really conducive to a great mind. I wish in many ways that they could cut off the brain and let it live on its own without the encumbrance of this physical body. We would have a much better world, a world where women would run everything, where only 10% of the males would be kept alive for reproductive services and be put to pasture. It would be a much better body.
There's some irony in that, and given how viscerally these works affect people as well. Yes, they're very cerebral, but they also tend to grab people from right in here and sort of draw that from them. There's a great physicality to these works as well as a cerebral quality.
That's a nice compliment. And this is appreciated really because to paint is a solitary profession, and the doubts have a tendency at 4 o'clock in the morning to get kind of painful. But then there's the next day, and you go back in the studio and there's something nice waiting for you, smiling at you. So keep doing it. And yes, the only advice that I can give to an artist is work, work, work.